Alright guys, we're back again. We're talking about the Steam Deck and just gonna highlight some news. So this is from Kotaku, and Valve says it hasn't found a game that the Steam Deck can't handle. According to one Valve dev, all games tested on the device run at 30 frames per second or higher. So looking at this article, yeah, the games all run at 30 frames per second, which is pretty good. That's kind of what Xbox One and PlayStation 4 and Nintendo Switch, they all sort of target 30 frames per second as a bare minimum, and some games do run at 60 frames per second. So it seems like the Steam Deck is trying to do what most consoles do, which is keep games around 30 to 60 frames per second. And then in the article it says, in an interview with IGN, designers and programmers, Valve explained that after years of testing and developing hardware, the Steam Deck has reached a level of performance that might surprise some folks. We've been looking at various games over the past few years in the back catalog, said Valve. But the real test for us was games that were coming out last year. They couldn't really run very well on previous types of prototypes and architectures we were testing. So it looks like it should run games at 30 frames per second, which is a decent way to play video games. 30 frames per second necessarily isn't that bad. If you're playing on PC, you're probably playing at 60 frames per second, just because most PC gamers generally have higher frame rates. You can kind of adjust the settings and get it to 60 frames per second for the most part. Not everybody's playing at 60, but yeah, 30. If you ever test 30 to 60, you'll notice a huge difference. 30 is a lot choppier than 60, but 30 is still very playable. So this is some good news. If we look here, I was just looking at the ProtonDB, and these are games that run on Windows, and games that work are 15,400. And the last video I made was about a week and a half ago, and that number was 15,261. So they actually have 140 more games now that work on Linux or on Proton Steam's software. The software that's going to run on the Steam Deck is called Proton, and that's running Wine, which is translates Linux Windows graphics calls into Windows, translates Windows graphics calls and Windows API calls into POSIX, which is what Linux can read. So it's actually kind of doing emulation of Windows to Linux. And so for this, I got 140 more games that work versus the last time I recorded. It was 15,261. So 140 more games in about a week. That's good progress. Hopefully this number can just grow exponentially. So by the time the Steam Deck comes out, it'll actually be, almost all the games that you throw at it will actually be, in this green playable state, or, in the gold playable state, whatever. Between the two, that would be really good. So they are getting more games that work, and that's a good positive sign. Hopefully this continues and the compatibility just grows exponentially, so that by the time the Steam Deck comes out, nothing is left broken or unplayable. So now the Steam Deck has an optional built-in FPS limiter for better battery life. Valve's Pierre Lougraface clarifies that 30 FPS is more a floor than a target. When Valve revealed last Thursday that the Steam Deck handheld will target 30 Hz, not everyone was impressed by the low bar, but Valve's Lougraface has taken to Twitter to clarify the original comment. So he's saying right here, the 30 FPS target refers to the floor of what we consider playable in our performance testing. Games we've tested and shown consistently met or exceeded that bar so far. There will be an optional built-in FPS limiter to fine-tune performance versus battery life. So yes, they want to have 30 FPS be the minimum of what games run on the Steam Deck, and that makes sense. Like I was saying before, you don't want to have a game below 30. You want to have games generally between 30 and 60. Most people will be able to tolerate 30 frames per second. And, you know, of course, people would prefer, most gamers would probably prefer 60, but, you know, a lot of people can do with 30 frames per second. So I guess he's just trying to say the minimum games they want to run are at 30. So he did clarify that, which is good. I mean, you want to have games running higher than 30. If every game were to run at 30, it would be kind of sluggish, and it probably wouldn't sell that well necessarily, because if you're barely hitting 30, then you're probably then hitting in the 20s, and if you're playing games in 20 frames per second, it's going to be very slow and choppy, and it's not going to be a fun experience. But looks like they're targeting 30 to 60 or 30 to 40, whatever their internal target is. That's good. I think it's good. And for the last bit of news on the Steam Deck, some guy 3D printed a Steam Deck, and I guess the ergonomics are pretty good. I don't know how he was able to do this, but he was able to 3D print it and do a 1-to-1 scaling, and I guess it's pretty ergonomic. The only thing he said is that the B button is very close to the right triggers, so your hand does kind of get cramped if you have to press B and then right trigger and then B again, because they are so close to one another. Don't really think it's that big of a deal, but I guess it could be. Steam Deck just really reminds me of a Wii U, pretty much. A Wii U that's kind of more curved on the edges. But other than that, I just totally see a Wii U every time I see a Steam Deck, so I don't think it's going to be that uncomfortable, but you can generally wait for reviews, you know, if you don't want to pre-order the thing. And the last thing is yeah, if you want to order a Steam Deck, still $399 for the base model, $529 and $649. But all of the availability looks like it's going to be Q2 2022, after Q2 2022. So it could be Q3 2022 or Q4 2022. Guess they really don't know what the availability is going to be like on this thing. So probably want to put in an order right now if you're thinking that you might want one in the next year or so. Because right now we are in Q3 2021. So if you put in an order now, you're likely to get your console in a year. Who knows? Probably even if you think that you might want to get it, I would just say put in the $5 and just reserve it, and then you'll have a spot in the line, and then if you want to get it, you can go ahead and you can buy it. And if you don't want to buy it, you can always cancel your reservation and get your $5 back. So that's kind of how I would approach it. Put in the $5, reserve it, and if you don't want to get it, you can always cancel it. You could cancel it anytime you want if you think the Steam Deck's not for you. And that's pretty much it. I'll see you guys in the next video. And have a good day wherever you're at, wherever you're watching this from. Later.